Afternoon, everyone that's already here. We're expecting quite a few more, so there'll be people popping in, I imagine, for the first few minutes or so. For those of you that haven't met me, I am Rosie. I am your L&D specialist. This afternoon's session I'll be running with Sam Ridgewell, who is from Empower Development. So what we'll be doing this afternoon is taking you through lots of information about getting the most out of your appraisal. So as you're all aware, it is sort of appraisal season as we come into the new year. And you would have realised that Samuel sent out an email a few weeks back with the appraisal form along with the guidance notes as well. And it's basically how we're going to be able to get the most out of your conversation. So if you've got any questions throughout, please post them into the chat box to everybody, and we will answer those at the end. And if you have any personal questions, please feel free to send them through to me by myself on the chat box, and we will read them out anonymously at the end as well. I think we're ready for the next one, Sam.
Okay.
So based on what I've just said, you can see on the screen that there are 3 boxes that make up our appraisal process. So we have the employee that's completing self-evaluation and updates your CPD hours on CFC Learning. Your manager will then, or your line manager will then add comments, will book the meeting and also review your CPD hours. And then you'll have that all-important appraisal conversation. So what you'll be expected to take away from today is predominantly that last box, which is appraisal conversation and how you can really get the most out of it.
Excellent.
Over to Sam.
Okay, so as we approach appraisal conversations, it's worth considering that you will be the person most invested in your career. So this conversation really is going to be for you, for your benefit, to help you with your development, as well as reach those goals that you're looking to. And as we go into appraisal conversations, we want to be thinking about them as a two-way conversation. So of course, your manager is going to have feedback for you to pass along. There is also an opportunity for you to be talking to them about what your thoughts are on the year and what you want to be working towards over the next coming year. So I want you to first of all have a think about the type of feedback we might be getting in appraisals. And to do that, I'd like you to imagine that you've just been into a client meeting. And as you exit the meeting, you look down and realise you've got some toilet roll stuck to your shoe. Now, you turn around to your colleagues and you go, "Oh no, that's so embarrassing. I didn't know that that was there." And they turn to you and go, "Oh, do you know, I saw that, but I just didn't know how to tell you, so I didn't want to say anything." Now, when we look at feedback, we're really going through a similar process. Your manager is there to hopefully give you the guidance to avoid you having that toilet roll on your shoe. So they're going to be able to give you information that's going to help you do the best thing to help develop your career and also give that impression that you're looking for. Now, when we get feedback, there's 2 types of feedback that generally we're going to be looking at. First is the constructive feedback, where there's opportunity for improvements and change. And that's where you want to be looking for what you can do to improve that situation. So taking away actions that you can embed for better outcomes. The second type of feedback is the things you're doing really well, when you've been told you're doing a really good job. And sometimes with that feedback, it can be a missed opportunity because you'd like to understand more about what you can do better. So when I learned how to drive, I had a driving instructor who took me out, and I went out for a day, came back, thought it had been quite a good day, but I didn't get much information back from him. So I thought maybe I needed to improve the way I was approaching my roundabouts. The next day, I started focusing and slowing down a lot more towards my roundabouts, becoming a little bit more cautious and second guessing myself. And he turned to me and said, "What are you doing? You were doing this perfectly yesterday and you're getting it completely wrong today." Now for me, I had no idea I was doing it perfectly because he hadn't told me. So really what you want to be making sure is that when you know that you're doing a good job, you understand what it is you're doing well. So a couple of phrases for you. When you're getting good feedback, you want to be able to ask, well, what is it that went well? And how could I do even better? So what went well and even better if? So you can be looking for ways to make those improvements. When we're looking at our career development as a whole, it's really nice to be able to start with that end goal in mind. So I'm just going to ask you to take a moment to have a look here at this diagram and identify which of these might best suit your career goals. So we've got senior manager, subject matter expert, line manager, innovator, job security, completing certain qualifications, or having your external profile enhanced. So as you all have a look at that for a moment, just try and identify which one or two of these things are your key priorities right now. And as you've identified that item, I want you to focus on that as we go through the next sections, to really be thinking about what actions can help you work towards that particular goal for yourself. Now, as we look at appraisals, we often talk about SMART objectives. So for those of you coming to your first appraisal, this might be a new term for you, but for those of you that had it before, you've probably heard this lots of times. However, it's always critical, because if we are able to set our objectives in a way that's SMART, it becomes really clear for you to see whether or not you've been able to meet them or even exceed them as it comes to a review process. So when we're looking at SMART objectives, we're looking at objectives that are specific. And if we just look to the right, there's some examples there of how you might be able to test this out. So we'll know it's specific if you can follow it up with the other sentence. So here, specific, so that I am able to, or so that I can improve my. Or you can use the phrase, this will be done by, so you know how it's going to be done. Then we have measurable. So what is it that you're looking for in terms of an outcome, and how is that going to be measured? So here you can use the sentence, we will know this is done when. We then have achievable. So in order to do this, you will. What do you need in order to make sure you can actually meet that goal? Do you need any support or resources, or maybe any time or exposure to other individuals? Then we have relevant. So we're looking here to make sure the goal is relevant. So maybe to support the department by, or maybe relevant to you in your job role. And then of course, time. So knowing when we're going to do it. And you'll usually have rolling objectives that might take place over the whole year. You want to make sure you've also got some that you're spreading out throughout the year so that you're able to accomplish things in stages rather than look at the end or the mid-year review and try and make sure you're ticking them all off at that process. Now, when we're looking at objectives, there's a really nice framework to look at these in 3 different ways. And this is a framework around how to get promoted. So usually a good title that makes people want to pay attention. Of course, we want to know what's in it for this one. And here we're looking at 3 different things. So firstly, our performance. So this is your ability to do the job. Then your image, which is essentially your brand. So that impression that you're leaving behind. And finally, your exposure. And this is all about who knows you. So we'll look at these each in turn. Firstly, we're going to look at performance. So this is all about being able to do your job and doing it to a high standard. When we're looking at this, particularly in an appraisal process, your manager is going to be the person who's deciding on your performance, and they're going to have a 2-way conversation with you on that. Really, it's going to be about what you're able to perform and how that meets with their expectations for the role. Now, sometimes we can have different values aligned to different jobs. So for example, you might be working really hard on establishing relationships with new clients. It's worth checking with your manager what their key objectives are. For them, they might have the key objective of making sure that you have much better data and controls in place and your processes are improving for your current clients before thinking about the new ones. Or it might be the other way around. At different times and for different managers, priorities are going to vary. So when you look at your performance over the past year, you want to also be considering how that fits against what the manager values. So let me give you an example. I was once working with someone who felt that their manager had a little bit of sort of frustration with them around something. They'd been working really hard on a particular project, but they didn't feel like they were getting the recognition for that work that they'd been putting in. So they had a conversation and asked the manager and said, hey, I've been working really hard to deliver you a Rolls Royce on this particular project, and I just feel like there's something missing. What are your thoughts on this? And the manager said, okay, I'm not after a Rolls Royce. I'm actually looking for 5 minis. So this individual was working really hard to make sure that they could do something absolutely perfect, but really what the manager's priority was at that time were to get things done well enough to move on to the next, because they had multiple objectives they needed to be achieving within a short time frame. So although the individual had been putting all their effort in and doing a really good job, they were slightly off target for what the manager wanted for them to meet their expectations for that year. So it's well worth just making sure that you are checking in regularly throughout the year, as well as during the appraisal process, to put your focus on the things that your manager most values. Then we'll have a look at image. Now, when we're looking at image, we're going to bring this one back here. So let's do a quick poll in the chat. What colour dress do you see? It's got a couple of golds. Blue and black. We've got a 50-50 split at the moment. Lots more golds. Gold's currently in the lead. Moving back, making a couple more. Yep. Okay, so we're getting about 50-50 split now. So I imagine lots of you have seen this dress before. You're wondering why on earth it's on the slide. For those of you that haven't seen it before, you're probably wondering what on earth is going on. So if you haven't seen this dress before, apologies. It's just going to take you a little while to get your mind around this one, because why are we all seeing different colours? So we're all looking at the same image here. Now, what happened with this photo was someone had a choice between 2 different outfits, and they sent pictures to their friends and said, which one do you think I should wear? And one of the options was a blue and black one. But the friend replied and said the white and gold one. And they said, well, there isn't a white and gold dress. And she's like, well, no, there definitely is. That one there, that's white and gold. So the individual decided to put it up on Facebook and ask everyone what colour dress they saw, and it just split. Everyone could see one of 2 things. Now, whatever colour you're seeing, that colour will be very clear to you. And where someone else has seen a different colour, although you can hear the fact that they've seen it that way, you'll never see it their way. And what's true for you will stay true for yourself. And this is really quite key to think about when we look at image, because we will always be trying to do a good thing. However, other people might see something that we're doing in a different way. And the value really comes from understanding how they've seen it. So if, for example, I showed you this image and we didn't have this conversation and you'd never seen this photo before, you would rightly assume that everyone sees it in the same way that you do. However, through having this conversation and understanding there's different perspectives, we have the awareness that we do actually see this dress in different colours. So when we're looking at image, what we want to do is hear from other people about what they're seeing. Now, those of you that used to watch The Office, how would you describe this individual? Let's put that into the chat. Don't worry about fitting it nicely. Tell me what you're thinking. Excellent. Oh. Okay, so general consensus that this isn't a good person to work with, probably not a good person to work for, and you wouldn't want to be the manager of this individual. So we make these conclusions based on what we see of the individual from the character on TV. And really, we're making these conclusions purely based on his behaviour. What we don't see is how well he does in his job. We don't see how well he's meeting his job description, whether or not he's hitting his targets, how he compares to his peers or his competition. But we come to this conclusion and we're quite sure of ourselves. that he's not going to be a good person to work with because of the way he behaves. And this is really quite a nice indicator how important image is when we're looking at our overall performance and our overall ratings. So image here, we're looking at different behaviors, communication, and also visual impressions. So before I go into that, I want to share with you this perspective that a wise grad once shared with me. Now, she was coming in for a graduate assessment day and her dad had given her this advice. Make sure you're you, but be like Barocca. So you, but on a really good day. So we all know that we have days where we wake up, we get a shower, we blow dry our hair, put on our best clothes, and we feel like we can absolutely do anything that day. We also have days where we wake up and we hope that nobody wants to put the videos on today because we're just hiding away and we just want to get through the day as quickly and pain-free as possible. Now, the days that we're probably on our best is when we're going to be performing our best. And the impression that people are going to be taking from us will be based on what they see of us when they see us. So with that in mind, I'd like you to just take a look at these two pictures. So we're looking at Suits now. Those of you that haven't watched Suits, don't worry, you don't need to have watched it to answer this question. So we have Mike here, and here he is first, here he is second. So here are both of these pictures together. Now, looking at these pictures, which version of Mike do you think is the experienced lawyer? I use the word lawyer lightly there. So the experienced lawyer, is it the one on the left or the one on the right? Cool, left, excellent. Now here's where it gets interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? Button-down shirt. So no lawyer's ever going to wear one of those. The hair. Looks tidier, looks smarter. Other things we've probably got as well is the bag, the fact he's wearing a satchel, maybe the fact he's holding his pen and paper, the way he's tied his tie, that often comes up. Now, what's interesting is that based on the way he's presenting himself, decided how experienced he is as a lawyer. Now, there's no right way of doing this because if we were looking at Zuckerberg, we wouldn't expect him to be wearing a shirt and tie, certainly not a suit. So there's no right way. But it is worth paying attention to the fact that people will be making conclusions about how that is for you. So you want to work out how this aligns within your Barocca, but make sure it's the best version of you. So there's three different things we look at when we're looking at image. So the first is your behavior. So behavior consists of things like being positive. So let me give you an example here I'm sure lots of you are familiar with. You have a conversation with someone and you ask them how you're doing, and the conversation goes something like, oh yeah, it's good, but it's just so busy at the moment. I thought it'd be quieter during lockdown, but it's just been mad. I can't believe how busy it is. It doesn't seem to be lightening up at all. Now, imagine you get into a lift and you get in with a director and you turn around to them and say, hey, how are you doing? And they say, yeah, okay, but it's just really busy at the moment, isn't it? I can't believe how busy it is. It's just been mad since lockdown. I can't see it getting any better. You'd probably look to them and think, hang on, you're not meant to talk like that. And why is that? So we have a certain expectation that senior people shouldn't be complaining about being busy, yet it's something we do in our conversations quite a lot. And that comes down to this image of positivity. And we expect people to be positive at certain levels. Now, what we often talk about is dressing for the job you want. You might have heard that phrase. I like to think of this more like acting for the job you want. So you want to act as though you're in the job that you're aiming for. So positivity is a really great way of increasing the impression of your image. Then we have reliability. And again, this is the perception. So you might be 5 minutes late to something because your meeting before overran and it was critical. If the person you're meeting with only sees you being 5 minutes late and doesn't have that other perception, then they might see you as being unreliable or unpunctual, even if that's not your usual behavior. We also want to make sure we're remaining calm. And again, this is a perception. So you can be like that swan that's paddling like mad under the water, as long as you're looking like you've got it all under control, then a calm image is fantastic. You also want to make sure you've got people around you that you can tell that you're struggling with something. You want to make sure you're controlling where that image is being presented. You want to be organized, and again, perception of organized. So your desk might be a complete mess, but you know where everything is. However, people are just going to see the mess on your desk. We want to be punctual, we've mentioned, team players, looking out for everyone around you, self-starters, praising other people, and easy to manage. Now, easy to manage usually becomes more important the more senior you get. So as you progress and you get promoted, you have a big jump, you've got a lot to learn, but actually the expectation is you'll be able to look after yourself a little bit more. So in order to manage that one, it's really worth making most of the internal mentoring program or mentors around you that can help you to make sure you're going to your manager when you need to, but you're also trying to find other opportunities to get some support. And being solution focused. So whenever you're coming across a problem, you do your best to present that problem with a potential solution. Then we look at communication. So communication is coming in from a few different ways. Firstly, we'll look at language. And language, by what I mean here, is the words that we're choosing to use. So making sure you avoid things like fillers. For example, using the word like too often. Or any kind of self-depreciation where you're knocking yourself down. So saying, for example, oh, I'm just a graduate, or I've only been doing this a couple of months, but. So anything that's going to knock your credibility down. We want to be using jargon, so try and get to speed with what's been said in the room as quickly as you can. And then the mode of communication. So any baby boomers watching this now, chances are you're very used to using the phone, and that was your main type of communication. And it infuriates you when somebody won't pick up the phone to you and instead they'll send an email back and forth. Now for Gen Zs and some Gen Ys, the phone is something that's obsolete. If you want to book a taxi, if you want to book a restaurant, if you want to order a takeaway, all of these things can be done by pressing a button. So now the phone isn't really something people are used to, and it's quite often something they're not comfortable doing. However, if you've got someone who's trying to get hold of you on the phone, you want to make sure that you're also getting back to them in that way. We then got listening skills, and here it's about listening in order to understand and trying to avoid listening to think about what you're going to say next. So you want to avoid that internal voice in your head that goes off when you're preparing your response. Eye contact, it's showing you're engaged with other people and what they're saying. And on video, that really means looking as close to the camera as you can. So to do that, quick tip, make sure your video is just underneath the camera. So right now I'm looking at me because that's the natural place to look while you're talking on camera, but I'm just underneath the video, so it probably looks like I'm talking to you. Whereas if I'm looking down here, then that's going to feel quite distant. Then we've got body language. So what are you portraying? And again, this links to positivity. So positive body language being things like leaning in, showing you're engaged, and making sure that you've got confident body language. So avoiding shrinking up and reducing yourself. And then facial expressions. And for some people, these will be a big giveaway to what you're thinking. So being conscious of how much your face is sharing and trying to work on that poker face when you have got some news that you're trying to work through, rather than showing exactly your thoughts straight away. So then we've got the visual impressions, which we've touched on with Mike's example there in terms of close, but also being alert. And then online profiles. So at the moment in this virtual world, online profiles and LinkedIn is the closest thing we have to an underwriting floor. Okay, so this is the way that the market tends to be seeing one another. So make sure you're building out that exposure by engaging with people through those channels. And then credentials. So if you've got any credentials you can add, then build those in as well. So the final piece of the pie here is exposure. And this is about who knows you. So I'll summarize these, pulling them into your objectives here. Your exposure is all about building that internal network, external network, and then making sure you know people and you're known. So what you really want is for people in the organization and externally to be aware of who you are and what you're all about. And that's going to give you more opportunities to be able to put yourself forward, stretch objectives, and have different things taking place to help you build out that experience to help you with your progression. So when we're looking at actually developing these types of skills, I want you to think back to my driving instructor. However, this time we're learning to drive in a classroom. So you're in a classroom and someone's there talking you through a manual of how to use a car, all the signs, getting you prepared and ready to drive. But of course you come out of that class with no idea how to actually drive because you've just learnt the theory. You then go on your lessons, you've got someone there with you, they're guiding you, they're helping you, and you're learning how to do it. But you really become a good driver after you've passed your test and you're out driving on your own. You get things wrong, you reflect on it, and you look to push your comfort zones and try and increase your experience in driving. And this is what we call the 70-20-10 model. So when we're looking at PDPs, we're really looking at how we develop. And we want to be looking at ways to develop through experience. So to give you some examples here, education, the 10% is the classroom. So say, for example, we're looking at increasing our relationships. So if we're looking at building out these relationships, then we want to maybe go on a course to understand how we can better improve our network. Maybe you want to read one of my favorite books, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Maybe go on some soft skills courses, some lunch and learns, and that's going to give you some of the theory. Now, it's not going to help you develop the relationships. In order to do that, we want to be looking at ways to actually start to experience it for ourselves, but firstly, get a little bit more support for our exposure. So the 20% from exposure comes from maybe getting advice from people who are really good at this, speaking to mentors, getting some feedback in terms of where you could improve it from previous experiences. And then the 70% is getting out there and doing it, starting to form relationships of your own, build those relationships, and also work to improve the ones that you find challenging. So when you're doing your performance plans, we want to be looking for ways to make sure that we're not just listening about the courses, but how we're going to put them into practice. So avoid things like attend a presentation skills course or attend an Excel skills course. And instead think about, what do I actually want to see different in what my abilities are? And then work backwards. The course might absolutely be an answer to helping you get there, but it's all about thinking about how we put these development plans into practice in order to make sure we can make the improvements actually on the job. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to have a moment now just to think about things that you might be able to do to help you get ready for your appraisal. So there might be things in terms of preparing for that conversation, or things to think about in terms of developing your pie or your performance. There might be things that we haven't covered that you've got some questions on. So use the chat box if you want to pop some questions in there now.